Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Going to be talking about advanced risk management today. We'll just give a minute to see if there's anyone else that's joining, and then we'll get into it. Thanks for coming. I know it's getting to the pointy end of the year and everyone's super busy, so we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today. Okay, I'm not going to take up too much more time and we'll get started. So just some of the logistics, and I'm sure if you've attended one of these before, you're very much aware of this. This is a recorded session, so that will be made available to you after. Please, if you have any questions, if you can use the chat or the Q&A. I'm by myself today, as you can see, so if you pop it in the chat, I'd be extremely grateful, and we'll get to all of those questions at the end. If we do miss anything, or if it's something that I couldn't answer, of course I'll get the required information and we'll pop it in a Q&A as well with any other information that we think is necessary. All right, let's get into it. Before we start the official session, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands of which we all meet today and pay our respects to elders past and present. Like I said before, the session will be recorded, so you can share it around with others as well. Questions in the Q&A, and if we don't get to them, of course, we'll respond to them after. So some of the key things that we're going to be looking at today is just around how you can tailor your risk matrix. So just not just the 5x5 and the way that that's set up, but you can also tailor that language. So just really taking you through how that can work and what else you can get out of that, making the risk register really dynamic and allowing you to really get into those assessments. You can change the consequence and likelihood criteria as well as the language in the matrix itself. How we link enterprise risks to incidents when they occur and as they occur in our organisation, and that automation, meaning that data is automatically tracked for us. Linking other reported events to risks when they're essentially identified. So there's kind of two ways that you can do that. How we report. Or the report that's available in Logiqc and really the benefits that can have to you. And then we'll also have a quick look at the overview of what the risk dashboard can bring. So just really focusing on all of those areas of our risk. So without further ado, I'm going to step into the platform and we'll go and have a look at that. So I am in a demo and I've opened essentially a risk details form. And what I wanted to show you here is the risk matrix. We can see here it's possibly quite similar to what a lot of people have in their platforms at the moment. But what Logiqc gives you is it gives you a range of different risk matrices that you can pick from, and you can even customize your own. Now, if you, and I've attached this article to the last slide, but if you go into the knowledge base and you search a risk assessment matrix, you'll see all the options that are available. There are free risk matrix options, which gives us a different view and staggers the hot and cold side of the matrix somewhat differently for each. So you've got free options that we can change for you at any time. And that includes up onto option 14 here. Then you have paid matrix options that our developer can build into your platform, and they go all the way, I think it's about number 20 or 22 at the moment. Nope, 23. And if none of these fit within your particular risk context or fits within your risk management framework, we can essentially customize and build your own for $450. So if anyone have been struggling with that and thinking, I need to change this matrix, let me know, send me an email, and we can certainly see how we can go about that for you. Now, I said that we can change the language of our risk matrix, and that happens in admin mode. So if you're an admin user, in your risk settings, you have a range of different things that you can change. The first here is the cell language of your risk. Now, we all have a really, really red category, and whether that's extreme, catastrophic, very high, this allows you to essentially override that and change that language so that it is reflective of your organisation and exactly what your framework says. So that when staff, your risk managers, when they look at that framework, the language that is presented on the framework or presented on the matrix is exactly what is in your framework. Furthermore, generally your risk your risk settings will present like this, where you can see the language that you can change in the cells, and you can also put those assessment criteria results in that essentially tells us what is the impact when the risk is extreme on a range of different categories. I'll just drag down. You can see there how much information we can actually populate in here. And I'll show you this on the other side. This is 1,722 characters out of 4,000. So you can see there that you can be really descriptive. But this is essentially what we're all used to. We can see the criterion and we can see what that assessment result is. So essentially what it is that we need that staff member to do, how we want to manage that risk as we move throughout this process. But when you click this little override likelihood and consequence, that means we can change that language as well. So again, wanting to make it as familiar as related to your policy and procedure as we possibly can. So once we've overridden those, essentially coming down to the bottom of the screen and making sure we save. Now, for those who weren't aware, you can also link your risk management framework or your risk management policy in here, and that will be visible on screen for your staff member as well. What does that look like? Oh, sorry, wrong slide, is when your user comes in to make that assessment. So we can see here, so all of this language can change, all of your consequences can change, and even the matrix language can change. What that then looks like is when your user comes in and they say, yep, it's almost certain and the consequence can be extreme if we do not control this risk. They'll, of course, at first glance, see how we need to manage that moving forward, but they'll see the risk criteria in here as well. So what does that look like in our organisation? We need to have sustained adverse publicity when it comes to reputation, actual or potential unexpected patient death, if it comes to clinical, health and safety, fatality or multiple fatalities, death of a staff member. So we can see here that it will really help us to assess that risk in its entirety. So again, risk settings in admin mode gives you full control of how you want that matrix to present. Okay, the next thing that we're going to look at is how we can actually link our incident types with two particular risks, so that when our staff members report events that occur, that's automatically captured and that's automatically contributing towards this threshold. So I'm using the risk of pandemic and COVID-19. So as you can see here, we've fully described that risk, we've controlled it, we've assessed what that means in our organisation. But then we've made a decision and we've said, okay, we need to have incident types that are contributors to this risk. So if I go and look at my incident register, you'll see which ones I've selected here. I've created an incident category with subcategories that relate specifically to COVID-19. So what I'm wanting to record here is if we've had an infection control incident that relates to that. There is an other field, so anything that's out of that norm that relates to COVID-19, where we had an issue with PPE, maybe we didn't use it, maybe it wasn't available, maybe we couldn't get any, or vaccinations as well. So those four things for me are contributors towards this larger risk in the organisation. We can also, of course, set feedback, and that will monitor the complaints, and then we can set that threshold. You can see here that we've had one incident that's been reported that's contributing to a threshold here. In the case that the threshold is 0, as it is here, the risk manager would have immediately been identified once this incident's been reported that we had that the risk is in breach of its threshold and that it needs to be reviewed. But at a quick glance there, you can also see kind of what that is. You've got the incident number and you can go ahead and further investigate that. So it's really important, if you want the risk register to work for you, to align those incident types, incident subcategories that will occur, so occurrences of that risk, as well as complaints that you think will be contributors. Now, let's say we didn't do that. We didn't set that up because we're not quite sure yet. We haven't had those discussions. We haven't set up those incident subcategories. We can also, from there, well, firstly, I'll show you that incident 24 that we were looking at. That was the contributor. Here it is. And when I look at the manage stage of that incident, I can see here in the yellow text, which I can't change, that that incident subcategory that is created or that was reported and used in this instance is particularly related to that particular risk. So I can see here that the incident that the staff member reported from a manager's perspective is already going to contribute to that threshold. So it's really clear where the incident subcategories or your complaints or your non-conformances are linked to that. If it's not, so if you have an incident that's been reported and it's not linked to a subcategory for a risk, when you assign action or you move it to close, you will have the option here to link it to an issue or link this issue to a risk that exists. When you toggle that switch, it will expose all of your identified risks in the organisation, and you can link that risk to one of or that incident or complaint or non-conformance to a risk in your organisation. You've got two ways that you can manage that, making sure that we're tracking so we can follow any trends that exist in the organisation. I see there are some questions and we will get to them. The next thing I wanted to share with you is the reporting that we have in the risk register or on the risk register. When we come to our analytics reports here and we look at our governance register reports, we can come down and we can find our risk heat map report. That report can essentially be generated for a range of different date ranges. But what is really important, or what I really like about this, is that when we look at different timeframes, we can actually see whether we changed any of our controls over that particular timeframe. So if we look here at the risk of the COVID risk that we had, it used to be, oops, sorry, I just need to get my mouse right there. The control rating used to be medium, or it is now medium. It was very high, so we lowered that. The likelihood increased, but the consequence decreased. So it's really showing us that we're working towards all of those, or we've implemented one of the mitigating actions that we've that we've identified, that we've been working towards, and we've come back and we've reassessed that risk. So that's really useful. It's really great for the board, for our senior leadership team to be able to see that we are working towards, we are getting towards what those targets are set for. The other really thing that I really like about this report is that if you click on the three ellipses, you can choose what it is that you want to represent in your report. So you've got a range of different fields here, but it's not always the information that is needed in the reporting space or the information that we want to share. So this really helps us to hone in, only pop that into the report that we want, and then of course we can export that and it gives us a beautiful report. The last thing I wanted to share is the risk dashboard. So when we look at our risk dashboard, and that's an add-on feature, we all have the My Dashboard, and there are, if you have the risk register, there is minimum risk reporting widgets on that dashboard. But if you look at the risk dashboard in its entirety, it really gives you a really good overview of how you are managing risk in your organisation. We can see what's been identified. We can see if anything's breaching its threshold. We can see that there are some approaching, and there are 7 that are within that threshold. So that's that one that we've had. We can look at our identified risks as a whole. We can see if any of our incidents are forming trends in analysis. And again, we can hone in and define what that looks like. So if we look at staff injury, we can see we've had 2 of those over June and July. We can see how our risks are rated, where the control is greater than the target, where the control is less than the target, where we still haven't rated some of our risks. We can look at our risk by business area. We can look at what's currently under review. We can see how many non-conformances have been reported, how many mitigating actions we have outstanding, and how our reported adverse events are linking to our risks. So a really good overview of how in the organisation we manage risk. But more importantly as well is if you have one of these additional dashboards, that Blackboard feature is enhanced here as well. And that essentially gives you an opportunity again to drag and drop data, editing your widgets to make sure that you provide the information that's required in that particular meeting. So this gives you a Blackboard, which is exactly what it says. It's usually empty, but I've added some things in here thinking about the meeting that I have to attend today and what the conversation is going to be about. So that's really how Logiqc can help you manage your risks quite effectively in the organisation just by using the platform and the platform features that are available. So I've got a couple of questions in the chat that I'll just go and have a look at now. All right. The question is, with the risk ratings, is there a reason why the audit isn't correct? Uncontrolled, controlled, and then target. That's just the way it's set up, because we kind of wanted to go from the highest to the lowest. Yeah, I see what you mean. The target's then sitting in the middle. I do not have a straight answer to that question. I can talk to the developers and see what the reason is behind that, and I can come back with some more information on that. Is it possible to have multiple risk assessment matrices? No, unfortunately it's not. There is only, as the build of the Logiqc risk register only caters for one risk matrix in there. Is there an option to amend some of the fields? We're finding our organisational risk register doesn't fit well into Logiqc fields. Can we amend the number of risk matrices for each risk then, or change the titles of these? I might reach out to you to better understand your question, Hannah, and see if there's anything, any way that I can help you achieve some of the outcomes. How do you see what incident or adverse event the risk is related to? So that happens here in the related adverse events component. When we expand that, it gives you an opportunity. So you can see it from here. And if I go, I'll just go out of here. Let me do that. So if we add a risk, regardless of the risk name, so let's say it's an operational risk, it's around business continuity, and it is, let's say, natural disasters. We'll fully describe that risk. We'll look at what the contributing factors are, the potential consequences, how we as an organisation control it. Do we have generators? Do we have a plan? If we've got, like if we live in a cyclone-prone area, what is it that we do? So we'll control all of that. We'll assess that risk, but then we can come into our adverse events here and we can say, okay, what is it that we're looking at? So from a business continuity perspective, we are looking for anything that's rated a natural disaster, but it might also include loss of service power or something else. So every time a staff member reports an event where natural disaster is the subcategory that they've selected, that will contribute to this particular risk of natural disasters. So it's really important that we think about the risk in the organisation. So let's say maybe it's patient safety, and then we think of the incident subcategories that can be contributors towards patient safety. So that might be a slip, trip, fall, that might be a medication mismanagement issue, and the like. So you will know in your organisation what are contributors to this larger organisational risk, and that's what we want staff to report. We want them to report the contributors so that we can see if any trends are forming and whether we're mitigating our risk effectively. The question is, can we link incidents to risk after they're closed? I've never tried, so I will go and test that, and I will get back to you with a response to that. The comment, there's a comment that says it would be good to see the linked incidents under each risk. Again, you could potentially see that from the risk export if we select all columns. It may not be. I'll track that and follow that up. And if it's not possible, what I'll do is I will pop that in as a suggestion for improvement. How can we pull all related adverse events for a risk area without having to note each ID and look from there? Great question. And that sits in your risk management plan. So when we click on that risk management plan tab, if you click on the risk of the pandemic, which is the one we've been working on, you can change your report timeframe. So this is very much like the evidence report in accreditation, if you're familiar with that, but that will list all of the incidents that have been recorded. Again, what you need to note is that if you do not have visibility or access control over that, that might appear as the incident number, and you might have a description of confidential, but that will be how you will see all of the incidents that's been reported under that risk. And sometimes here you might see that you could potentially have a kind of a generic subcategory, like we had in that business continuity, we had loss of service power, which could impact on that natural disaster risk that we had there. But it could also just be that we had a power outage for 2 days. So it's really important that we try and be specific with our incident subcategories where they are contributing towards those risks. Sarah, you can see the actual incident linked if you look at the risk management plan. And yes, we will be sending out a recording. So anyone that's had a not so wonderful experience today with internet and things like that, you should be able to review this again. Yep. The next question is, can we export this? Absolutely. Every single thing in Logic, of course, is exportable. If you're clicking on that risk management plan, you can also just print it from here if you right click, and that will give you an idea as well. But I don't like that option all the time. I prefer to just make sure that I export those risk management plans. When we do that though, big thing, remember to select all of your columns. It's easy to get rid of these in Excel than to have to come back and select more columns every single time. So select all the columns in the first instance, because Logiqc exports are what you see is what you get. Then export that into Excel and all of that information will be available for you. So remember that risk management plan will have all of the incidents, all complaints, all non-conformances that are related to that risk will appear in those risk management plans. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, I'll just go back to the presentation. There. There are some additional resources that are available. So, yep, that link to the risk assessment matrix is in there. I've also attached a resource that's called the Risk Register Overview. It just gives you a little bit of, if you're new to risk within Logic, it just gives you a little bit of an idea of how the register works. And then I've also added the risk dashboard brochure. Brian is asking if there's always a risk. Yes, for every single risk that you've identified in Logic, so anything that's in the identified risk column, not the draft, creates a risk management plan for. Yeah. I've got another question that I might just quickly demonstrate if that's okay. So the question is, are we able to identify the key controls and key consequences for each risk? Absolutely. When you go to the analytics report here and you click on that risk heat map report, which I went too far, you can, by using the ellipsis, you can look at what are your existing controls, consequences, contributing factors. What else did you say? Yep, they're all in there. So you just need to select what it is that you want to provide to your board, and then you can export that content into Excel, and it does quite a nice little report. I'll do that for you now so you can see what that looks like. And based on the selection that we've made, that's there as well with only the data that we've provided. So yes, absolutely, you can record or export and draft on that particular report. I like to call it a report builder because it just gives you an option to just do what you want. So the board might just want to look at what is the control versus the target to see how the organisation is moving towards it. So absolutely, go and play around with that. You'll find that it will give you all of the information that you need. Okay. Any other questions? Right. There's a couple of people that I will get back to because I have more questions. I will pop the suggestion to have them go from uncontrolled to target. I'll pop that in. There was another suggestion that I'll pop in as a enhancement as well. Other than that, thank you for joining. I know it's a super busy time for everyone, and I really appreciate everyone taking the time to be here today. There's a couple of more webinars, clinics, masterclasses coming up towards the end of the year, and of course we will continue this next year. So if you have any suggestion of what it is that you want to see in this webinar or in any of the webinars, please reach out, send me an email, send customer success at logic.com.au an email. We really would love to be able to give you more of the information that you want to see. It's been great having you all. If I don't talk to you again before the end of the year, have a lovely summer break, and if you're traveling, travel safe. See you everyone. Bye.